Hello and welcome. In this video, we will be conducting a case analysis of a significant Supreme Court decision. The case we'll be examining is Georgette v. Aggabao versus the Commission on Elections, the Provincial Board of Canvassers of Isabela, and Anthony Miranda, decided on January 26, 2005. By the end of this analysis, you will be able to, first, identify the key facts and background of the case. Second, pinpoint the central legal issue that the Supreme Court had to resolve. Third, understand the Supreme Court's ruling and the reasoning behind it. And fourth, explain the legal principles that were applied in reaching that decision. Let's begin by laying out the facts of the case. First, let's establish the facts and background of this case. The case arose from the May 10, 2004 elections in the Philippines. The main parties involved were Georgette v. Aggabao, the petitioner, and Anthony Miranda, the private respondent. They were rival candidates for the position of congressman in the 4th District of Isabela. During the canvassing of votes, a dispute arose concerning the certificates of canvass of votes, or COCVs, from two municipalities, Cordon and San Agustin. Miranda moved to exclude the first copy of these COCVs. He claimed they were tampered with, prepared under duress, and contained manifest errors. Aggabao objected, arguing that these grounds were only valid for a pre-proclamation controversy, which is not allowed for elections involving members of the House of Representatives. Despite Aggabao's objection, the Provincial Board of Canvassers, or PBC, excluded the contested COCVs. Instead, they used the 4th and 7th copies of the COCVs. Based on the results from these substitute COCVs, Miranda was determined to have the highest number of votes and was proclaimed the winner on June 14, 2004. Aggabao appealed this decision to the Commission on Elections, or COMELEC. He argued that the PBC acted without jurisdiction in hearing Miranda's petition for exclusion. Aggabao's appeal was assigned to the COMELEC's 2nd Division. While this appeal was pending, the COMELEC en banc, the full commission, issued a resolution directing the proclamation of the remaining winning candidates in Isabela, which included Miranda. 2 days after Miranda's proclamation, Aggabao filed this petition for certiorari with the Supreme Court. He asked the court to annul the COMELEC en banc's resolution and Miranda's proclamation, arguing that the COMELEC acted with grave abuse of discretion. In response, Miranda moved to dismiss the petition, arguing that the issue is no longer within the Supreme Court's jurisdiction but should be addressed by the House of Representatives Electoral Tribunal, or HRET. So, to recap, we have a dispute over election results, a proclamation, and a question of which body, the Supreme Court or the HRET, has the authority to resolve the matter. Now that we have the facts, let's identify the central issue that the Supreme Court needed to resolve. The basic issue for resolution, as stated by the court itself, is whether it can take cognizance of this petition for certiorari. In simpler terms, the question is, does the Supreme Court have the jurisdiction to hear and decide this case, or is it the responsibility of another body? To answer this, the court first had to define what a petition for certiorari is and when it can be used. The court explained that certiorari is a special civil action that can only be availed of if two essential requisites concur. First, the tribunal, board, or officer exercising judicial functions must have acted without or in excess of jurisdiction, or with grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack of jurisdiction. This means they must have done something they weren't allowed to do, or done it in a way that was arbitrary and whimsical. Second, there must be no appeal, nor any plain, speedy, and adequate remedy in the ordinary course of law for the purpose of annulling or modifying the proceeding. This is the principle of exhaustion of remedies. You must try all other available legal avenues first. So the core of the issue is whether Aggabao's petition meets these two requirements, especially the second one. Is there another, more appropriate remedy available to him? To resolve the issue of jurisdiction, the Supreme Court turned to the 1987 Philippine Constitution. Specifically, the court cited Article 6, Section 17 of the Constitution. This section establishes the electoral tribunals for both the Senate and the House of Representatives. It states that the Senate and the House of Representatives shall each have an electoral tribunal, which shall be the sole judge of all contests relating to the election, returns, and qualifications of their respective members. This means that for disputes concerning the election of a senator or a member of the House of Representatives, the Electoral Tribunal is the only body with the authority to decide the case. The court then referenced its own previous rulings to clarify the implications of this constitutional provision. In the case of Pangilinan versus Commission on Elections, the court ruled that the creation of these electoral tribunals divested the COMELEC of its jurisdiction over election cases pertaining to members of Congress. This includes pre-proclamation controversies. Furthermore, the court emphasized that the HRET has sole and exclusive jurisdiction over all contests relative to the election, returns, and qualifications of members of the House of Representatives. The crucial point is that once a winning candidate has been proclaimed, taken their oath, and assumed office, the COMELEC's jurisdiction ends, and the HRET's jurisdiction begins. So the rule is clear. For disputes involving members of Congress, the HRET is the proper forum, especially after a proclamation has been made. With the constitutional rule established, the Supreme Court proceeded to apply it to the facts of the Aggabao case. This application of the law to the facts is known as the ratio decidendi, or the reason for the decision. The court's reasoning was straightforward. First, the court noted that it was undisputed that Anthony Miranda had already been proclaimed, taken his oath, and assumed office as a member of the House of Representatives on June 14, 2004. This fact is critical because, as per the rule we just discussed, it marks the point where jurisdiction shifts from the COMELEC to the HRET. Therefore, the court concluded that Aggabao's proper recourse was to file an electoral protest before the HRET. His remedy was not to file a petition for certiorari with the Supreme Court. The court explicitly stated that certiorari would not lie in this case because there was an available and adequate remedy in the ordinary course of law, which was the electoral protest before the HRET. Aggabao had argued that Miranda's proclamation was null and void from the beginning, or ab initio, and that this should divest the HRET of its jurisdiction. However, the court rejected this argument. It cited the case of Lazatin versus Commission on Elections, which held that even if a proclamation is alleged to be invalid, the COMELEC is divested of its jurisdiction to hear the protest once the winning candidate is proclaimed. The court's reasoning for this is to avoid duplicity of proceedings and a clash of jurisdiction between constitutional bodies. It also shows due regard for the people's mandate, as the HRET is the body specifically designed to resolve such disputes. In essence, the court found that Aggabao had chosen the wrong legal path. The HRET was the correct forum for his complaint. Let's now summarize the key legal principles that were applied in this case. First and foremost is the principle of the sole and exclusive jurisdiction of the electoral tribunals. This principle, enshrined in the Constitution, establishes that the HRET is the only body with the authority to hear and decide all contests relating to the election, returns, and qualifications of members of the House of Representatives. Second is the principle of the divestment of COMELEC's jurisdiction. This principle states that once a winning candidate for Congress has been proclaimed, taken their oath, and assumed office, the COMELEC loses its jurisdiction over any election-related disputes concerning that candidate. The jurisdiction then transfers to the HRET. Third is the principle of exhaustion of remedies. This principle dictates that a party must pursue all available administrative or legal remedies before resorting to a higher court. In this case, the available and adequate remedy was an electoral protest before the HRET. Fourth is the principle that the alleged invalidity of a proclamation does not divest the HRET of jurisdiction. This principle clarifies that even if a proclamation is claimed to be null and void, the HRET still retains its jurisdiction to resolve the dispute. The HRET is the proper body to determine the validity of the proclamation itself. These four principles form the legal foundation of the Supreme Court's decision in this case. Finally, let's look at the Supreme Court's ultimate ruling in the Aggabao case. In view of all the foregoing, the Supreme Court dismissed the instant petition for certiorari for lack of merit. The court found that Aggabao's petition did not meet the requisites for certiorari because there was an available and adequate remedy in the ordinary course of law, which was to file an electoral protest before the House of Representatives Electoral Tribunal. The court's decision reinforces the constitutional mandate of the HRET as the sole judge of all contests relating to the election, returns, and qualifications of its members, especially once a proclamation has been made and the winning candidate has assumed office. To recap our objectives, we have now identified the key facts and background, pinpointed the central legal issue, understood the Supreme Court's ruling and its reasoning, and explained the legal principles applied. This case serves as a clear example of the separation of powers and the specific jurisdictions of different constitutional bodies in the Philippine electoral system. Thank you for watching this case analysis.